Join us now, former White House Communications Director for a short period of time, Anthony Scaramucci. He's out with the new book titled Trump, the Blue-Collar President. Anthony, good morning. Good to see you.
Hey, pleasure to be here. Will.
Let's get the number of days right. 11 days as Communications Director.
Yeah, you did that in the break. I appreciate that, you know. Why jip me out of like 9.1% of my federal career? You know,
So
I can't figure that out.
It wasn't 10, it was 11. So if you're Communications Director today, as you were last July, what do you say to the fact that President Trump has, just in the last couple of days, talked about unknown Middle Easterners being in a caravan? No proof for that. There's going to be this middle-class tax cut mysteriously, magically, in the next 2 weeks. No way that's going to happen. Rioting in California against sanctuary cities. No evidence of rioting. Those are 3 lies. What would you say to the president as he spouted those over the last couple of days?
So I think, you know, look, I mean, people are not going to say this to you on live air, but I think people are probably frustrated by all that. I think
Who?
I'm sure,
Which people? Inside the White House?
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure guys like Bill Shine and stuff like that are having honest conversations with him, saying, "Are you sure you want to go in this direction because it's going to cause a very far?" I think so. Yeah. I mean, listen, you'd be impressed with the direct conversations that people have with the president.
But they seem that they never.
Look, I had direct conversations with the president. I mean, you guys probably figured out I can't really hold myself back, so I've had direct conversations.
But how come those people, including yourself, never seem to prevail upon the president? He's going to continue to say these things.
So he has a very unique operating style, and I'll cede every single point on the table, and I do watch your show. I'm a fan of the show, and let's say everything he says is a lie. That's still missing the message of what he has to at least half of the United States. And so half the United States, Michael's asked me a question about my mom. What's your mom think about him when he's out there talking about the caravan and stuff like that? Most people that live in blue-collar neighborhoods, in my opinion, based on my experience, like him very much. And why do they like him? Because he's a challenge to the status quo, and he's a challenge to the establishment. And so, frankly, when you guys are upset about it and you're listing all the lies and you're trying to explain that you can't get a tax cut done in 10 days, people are almost happy about the fact that he is a wrecking ball inside of Washington and smashing into the establishment.
Shouldn't telling the truth on this stuff matter, though?
I think it does matter, absolutely. No, absolutely. Listen, I like telling the truth. You know, Coco Chanel once said you get the face that you deserve when you're 50. If you tell the truth, you don't have a lot of worry lines. So I like telling the truth. But I think the president is using the politics of emotion. I mean, look, I think Joe's correct on this. He's using the totems of emotion and the politics of symbolism to rally his base. He's very, very effective at it. And so if you want to beat the president, exposing his lies or explaining them to people, that's probably not going to beat the president. I think what would beat the president is, okay, here's a package of ideas for you. He did something very unique in political history, in my opinion. He won the Republican Party against the Republican establishment, and then he hijacked the base of the other party, the Democratic Party, and he moved it over to his side.
I can hear the people, Mike, I'll let you get watching this, pulling their hair out, saying, Anthony Scaramucci
that's your demo. I understand that.
No, it's a lot of Americans' demo. Anthony Scaramucci is saying the lying doesn't matter effectively.
Not saying that at all.
No, that's exactly what you just said. You said a couple of years of serial lying shouldn't matter to a voter.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm actually saying something very, very different. I'm saying that there's symbolism here. You can call out the lying, but it's like literally Teflon in a frying pan. I just really believe that. You can disagree with me. I'm not saying lying is appropriate. I'm saying the very, very opposite. I'm saying there's such a systemic problem, Willie, that the lying or whatever he says you're not going to penetrate him unless you change the game plan in terms of the advocacy against him. That's what I'm saying.
So, Anthony, what do you say?
I don't agree with the lying, by the way, and I would tell him on the air, I would tell him into that camera, I would tell him, you know, privately, you got to cool out with the lying, because what you're doing is you're hurting yourself in terms of the personal integrity of the presidency and you personally. No problem calling out the lying. I'm just trying to explain to you why blue-collar people are still voting for him. I'm trying to explain to you why 62.9 million people voted for him and why his poll numbers are up.
So what do you say to people like me probably, who say he doesn't care about that because he's a man of the moment? He is an expert in resentment. And he's using every chance he gets as president on the stump to use what he knows is the resentment out there among scads of people, working class people. He tells them what he thinks they want to hear, no matter whether it's a lie, and it's almost always a lie, because he knows that we will react, and he will have the best of both worlds. He will have their hearts and minds on the ground, and he will have them hating the media which they hate anyway, and it's working. What do you? It's altering. I think, I don't know for how long, the presidency of the United States.
Yeah. So you're almost in halftime, not to use a football expression, but I would be in the locker room saying, the current game plan, his offensive strategy is actually winning. You may not like him and find him distasteful, but there's a lot of people that do like him. Have to change the game plan. President Obama is a very articulate, very put-together guy. I went to law school with President Obama. I have a lot of respect for him. But his logical framework and the sentences that he was using in this past thing that you just put on, it's not going to work against President Trump. You would have to change the dynamic and rethink the game plan if you want to beat him. Again, ceding every point that you just made about the resentment, ceding the points about the hagiography and all the things that he does. I mean, it's all verifiable, so there's no defense of it. But if you want to beat him, you've got to change the game plan. You've got to rethink what your line of attack. Because the point of my book, and I have to admit this to you, I grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood, but I went to fancy schools up in your area in Boston. Then I went to Goldman Sachs, and I started to get channeled into confirmed biases. And so I started missing the economic desperation that was taking place inside the society. My parents were in the aspirational working class. They said, all right, go to school, you're going to do well, and you're going to break out and someday become financially independent. But when you go to these campaign stops and you actually meet these people, and I tell one story about Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I took the Secret Service day pin off, I crossed the security perimeter, went into the crowd and started asking people why they were there. And you would be saddened to hear their stories. Factories being, jobs being displaced, factories moving, economic anxiety, 2 part-time jobs, but not enough income, needing an EBT card to survive. Those are the people that said, okay, you know what? The establishment's not working.
Anthony, Joe's got a question for you here.
Sure.
Yep.
Morning,
so
Joe.
Anthony, first morning. So first of all, the lies. I agree with you. They're terrible lies. The president needs to stop lying. I also agree with you that the Democrats' game plan is not working. We've been talking about it here for some time. Going down the list of lies and responding to those lies allows him to stay on offense because he can spew 30 new lies a day, and you're always responding to what the president did yesterday. So I'm going to ask you to do. I do this exercise with Republicans. I say strategists. I say, what would you do for Democrats, and vice versa, Democrats for Republicans. So what would you tell a Democratic Party that still hasn't come to grips with Donald Trump and this, as you said, this sort of new offensive strategy that he's brought to American politics? What would your suggestion be to Democrats over the next 2 weeks and over the next 2 years? How do you beat Trump?
Well, I think the first thing is the packaging and the formulation of their strategy during the Obama era. It was probably failing, or at least didn't grab the blue-collar, middle-class people in places where the president won, like Michigan, say, parts of Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and places like that, Joe. And so what I would probably do is what good product people do is when they make a mistake, they say, you know what? Well, we put the product out, the recipe wasn't right, we're going to change the recipe. For some period of time, we have been ignoring what your real issues are. For me, it's not ethnocentrism or white nationalism and stuff like that, but what it really is people are having a hard time finding jobs. There's an unevenness to the educational system, the public education system. There's an unevenness to jobs training.
So let me stop you there, if it's all right.
Okay.
Anthony,
Sure.
if it's all right, let me stop you there and just say, let's talk about Donald Trump made promises that helped the working class out. This is also probably something that frustrates observers and Democrats. You look at 2 things that he's done. One, a massive tax cut that has helped, for the most part, larger corporations, has helped the richest Americans. That's the first thing he did. And now he's pretending he's going to have a middle-class, working-class tax cut. And then the second thing he did was he tried to get rid of some of the protections in the Affordable Care Act. So his policies haven't been geared towards the working class in Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and yet he still remains very popular there among working class, high school educated white voters. Why is that?
Well, because they're voting for a wrecking ball, Joe. They've made a decision that the entire fabric of the infrastructure of the establishment doesn't work for them. The people inside of Washington are not listening to them. And so even though you're making a very good point on policy, and some of it hasn't filtered down to them, although the Wall Street Journal did report about 2 weeks ago that middle class and lower middle class wages are up for the first time in 15 years. Even still, a lot more could be done for these people. But, Joe, a priori, they're voting for a wrecking ball. They want a wrecking ball to come into the system and smash these people more than any specific policy, more than any specific idea. And so if you're on the other side of that, you say, wait a minute, time out a second. You know, you guys are right. Your Liz pendants against the establishment is correct. Here are the 15 or 20 things that we are going to do for you to change this product. Forget about calling them out on lies, okay? It's like sitting at the high school in the cafeteria. There's a guy in the cafeteria who's not doing the right thing. You're blowing the whistle to bring the truant officer over. Not necessary to do that. Change the game, switch up the tactics and policy, and then you have a chance. But right now, those people, the ones I write about in this book, Joe, they're voting for a wrecking ball over everything else. And so all the logic that you make on the show, all of the declaration of veracity versus, fact-checking and all that other stuff is falling on deaf ears. In fact, if anything, a lot of those people are enjoying that to the great frustration of the people that live inside of Washington.
But, Anthony, I understand what you're saying in terms of branding or people feeling like, well, I don't care if he lies, I just want a wrecking ball, which I haven't met anybody who, and we actually interviewed some Trump supporters who felt he was telling them the truth. I think that's a problem for America. Do you think he's a good president? Do you think his lies are helping America? You personally, you've been in there. You know what kind of man he is, and you know what he's doing. Forget the wrecking ball branding thing. Yeah. What do you think about the way he's conducting himself and the trick he's playing on middle-class Americans with this tax cut lie, for example?
Well, I don't like I'm not a fan of the tax cut lie, but stepping back, Mika, just going into, is he a good president or not a good president? And we have to be very objective and balanced. In a lot of ways, he is a good president. The delayering of regulation, the simplification of the tax code, bringing back capital to the United States. People don't talk about this, but cutting the illegal immigration has taken the slack out of the labor market in the African American and Hispanic American labor communities, and it's made those numbers the lowest in economic history. So, at least since they've been recorded. So all of those things are very favorable. The overture to North Korea, I watch you guys show almost every morning. Even Joe said when he was making those overtures, okay, got to give him credit for at least trying to denuclearize that peninsula. So those things I think are positives. The lies, the mischaracterizations, the totems on the campaign stump, I'm not a huge fan of that. And I would be very happy to call him out on that. I didn't love the John McCain stuff. I did not like the child separation policy issue. I was out there very early on that. I also didn't like turning his back on the intelligence agencies.
It sounds like you don't like a lot.
No, it's a balance. See, here's the problem, Mika. Here's the problem. It's policy versus personality, Mika. That's the struggle going on right now.
It's policy versus lies, Anthony.
The wrecking ball is working. The wrecking ball is working. Who's going to rebuild it? Who's going to rebuild what's wrecked?
So that's a really good question. And so who's going to really rebuild it? Is it establishment Washington politicians that have been there for 10, 20, 30, 40 years? If it is those people, then they have to get out of the swamp for a little while and hit a reset and really understand what's going on. It's almost, again, like a focus group, consumer focus group. I've got my product. People don't like the way the product tastes. We have to establish a new flavor and a new design of the product. I understand what Mika's saying. Mika, I watch you every morning. I understand what you're saying. I understand the frustration about the lies. But if you want to beat them, you have to change your game plan. Just calling out the lies, it didn't work in the high school cafeteria, and it's not going to work right now in our domestic landscape. The way we're configured today, pursuant to what I discovered in the 6 months of writing this book.
All right, we got to go, Anthony, but thank you so much for being with us. We'd love for you to come back.
Hey, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I know you guys, it's sometimes one-sided at the table. I appreciate you at least hearing me out, so thank you.
Well, it is. Sometimes
we like the truth.
Sometimes it is a little too one-sided. Too many Republicans at the table. We're going to balance it out better.
Yeah, try to bring some more liberals, Joe. I think that would help.
We will do that, baby.
All right.
The book, Trump, the Blue Collar President, by The Mooch, Anthony Scaramucci, is on sale today. And by the way, Democrats, if you're angry at that conversation, you shouldn't be angry at that conversation. You should listen actually to what he said, because Democrats have got to figure out a better way to challenge Donald Trump, because what they're doing right now still is not working. This race is a lot closer than it should be. We're going to be back in a moment with a packed 8 a.m. hour. Stay with us.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.